Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Imagine the sky above you. It's not just this open, limitless blue expanse, is it?
Not at all, especially if you're flying a drone.
Exactly. For any drone pilot, it's actually a complex, invisible network. Rules, regulations. Understanding it isn't just about, ticking boxes for compliance.
It's fundamental safety and opportunity too.
Right. And frankly, avoiding some pretty serious trouble if you get it wrong. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Canadian airspace, specifically for remotely piloted aircraft systems, or RPAS, what most of us just call drones.
Yep.
We've really pulled together a stack of detailed sources for you, everything from the official regulations and those tricky certification exam drills to expert video insights and even the historical context behind why things are the way they are. Our mission today is pretty straightforward, to take what often feels like really overwhelming jargon.
It definitely can be.
And turn it into clear, practical knowledge you can actually use out there. So whether you're maybe prepping for your advanced certificate right now, or planning a complex pro job, or even just flying for fun on the weekend.
Knowing these rules is non-negotiable.
Absolutely crucial for safe and legal flights anywhere in Canada. By the end of this, you'll hopefully gain the confidence to navigate the skies, spot potential hazards almost instinctively, and understand exactly when and how you need to get authorization.
Think of it as your essential guide.
Exactly. Your shortcut becoming truly well-informed about the Canadian skies. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the absolute basics. What is airspace, fundamentally?
Well, the formal definition, if you look it up, is something like a portion of the atmosphere controlled by a country above its territory where flight ops happen and are subject to rules.
Right, which sounds a bit dry, maybe a little textbookish. Let's make that more relatable.
Good idea.
For me, I find it helpful to think of the sky like different zones on a really busy sports field. Some zones are like the main stadium, right? You've got referees, that's our air traffic control, ATC calling the plays, directing traffic, making sure everyone stays safe.
Active management.
Exactly. Then you have other zones, maybe more like a casual public park, fewer direct refs maybe, but you're still absolutely expected to follow the basic rules of the game so things don't descend into chaos.
Yeah. Safety is still key, even without constant oversight.
So today, we're going to explore how Canada has carved up its sky and why it's so incredibly important for you listening to know exactly which zone you're planning to fly in before you even power up your drone.
And that zone concept ties back to why we even have these classifications. It's not just a Canadian thing. This idea of national control over airspace is global.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it goes way back to the Chicago Convention in 1944. That set up ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, basically to create a standard global system.
So it's about international standards.
Exactly. It's about national sovereignty, sure, but also about making sure planes flying cross borders aren't entering total chaos. It provides that essential structure. Without these globally recognized zones, international air travel just wouldn't work.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, the international angle. So knowing that foundation, how does Canada actually segment its airspace? We hear these terms all the time, controlled versus uncontrolled.
Yeah.
Can you break down that crucial difference? Because it sounds simple, but I suspect it's not.
You're right. It's the fundamental divide. This is the first big split you need to grasp as an RPAS pilot. On one side, you have controlled airspace.
Our stadium with the referees.
Precisely money. In these areas, ATC is actively providing flight authorizations, separation services, which means keeping aircraft safely apart from each other and broadcasting essential flight information.
It's lots of oversight.
A lot. Generally, as any pilot in controlled airspace, whether you're in a big jet or flying an advanced drone mission, you don't move until ATC, the referee, gives you the green light. It's actively managed.
Okay, that's the tightly controlled stadium. What about the other side? Uncontrolled airspace. I think a lot of people hear that and think, great, freedom, anything goes.
Oh, yeah. That's probably the single biggest and most dangerous myth out there, especially for drone pilots.
I had a feeling.
We need to bust that myth right now. Uncontrolled airspace absolutely positively does not mean no rules.
Okay, so what rules do apply?
The Canadian aviation regulations, the CARS, specifically Part 9, which covers all RPAS, apply everywhere, full stop. Even in Class G airspace, which is our main uncontrolled category, you are still bound by strict, non-negotiable rules.
Such as?
Things like always maintaining visual line of sight, VLOS, staying below 400 feet above ground level, AGL, and maintaining safe distances from people and property. These apply universally.
So uncontrolled doesn't mean unregulated.
Exactly. The term uncontrolled refers specifically to the absence of continuous air traffic control separation services. It means ATC isn't actively keeping planes apart in that space. It does not mean an absence of regulations.
Okay, so the responsibility shifts.
Completely. It means you, the pilot, become the primary safety officer in that space. The mindset shifts from ATC is watching over me to I am directly responsible for ensuring safety. That's critical.
That is a fantastic clarification. No Wild West flying, even in uncontrolled airspace.
Got it. So to manage this whole system, both controlled and uncontrolled zones, Canada uses the International A through G classification system from ICAO, right?
That's correct. It provides that standardized structure, dividing airspace based on the services provided, the altitudes involved, and the specific operating rules for each class.
And having that global standard just makes sense, doesn't it, for pilots flying internationally?
Absolutely. Consistency is key in aviation safety.
And to make it a bit easier to remember these letters, let's use another analogy, maybe like school grades. Class A is like the superstructured graduate school, toughest rules, very specific entry requirements.
High altitude, IFR-only.
And then Class G, way down the alphabet, is more like kindergarten. You're mostly managing yourself, but like we just said, there are still definitely rules to follow. Basic safety rules always apply.
Now, for remembering the order A to G, there's that common mnemonic. I always find these helpful. All big cats do eat friendly giant goats.
Yeah, that's a classic. A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
The great little trick to recall the sequence. But knowing the letters is just the start, right? What do these different grades actually mean for a drone pilot in practical terms?
That's the key question. It's all about understanding the specific privileges and, more importantly, the limitations each class puts on your drone operations. And that historical context we mentioned is important here, too.
From ICAO.
Right. Canada's implementation of this AG system is detailed in official documents like the Designated Airspace Handbook, the DAH. That's your legal source for boundaries. It makes sure we align internationally. But Canada also has unique elements like our Class F airspace, which we'll get into.
It's a deliberate, structured system for safety.
Exactly. It's the foundation that allows complex air traffic, both domestic and international, to operate safely and efficiently.
Okay, so we've got the basics down. Airspace isn't empty. It's zoned, controlled versus uncontrolled, and we use the AG system. Now let's get specific, starting at the top. The absolute no-go zones for RPAS. Class A airspace. What is it, and why are drones banned?
Right. Class A is the highest level. Think way up there. It starts at flight level 180, that's roughly 18,000 feet above mean sea level, and goes all the way up.
Wow. Okay. High altitude.
Very high. And it's exclusively for aircraft flying under instrument flight rules, IFR. We're talking commercial airliners, business jets, flying on specific clearances from ATC.
So not for drones?
Absolutely not. For you as an RPS pilot, Class A is a 100% no-go zone. No exceptions, no special permissions. If you're studying for an exam, remember this. RPAS never operate in Class A, full stop.
Crystal clear. No drones in Class A. What about Class B? Is it the same deal, or is there a slight difference?
Class B also falls into the almost certainly off-limits category for drones, but it's really important to understand why and to clear up a major point of confusion, especially for exams.
Okay, what's the confusion?
It's the difference between Canadian Class B and U.S. Class B. They are fundamentally different systems.
Ah, right. You mentioned Transport Canada tests this.
They love it. In Canada, Class B is high-altitude controlled airspace, typically running from 12,500 feet up to just below Class A, so 17,999 feet MSL. Like Class A, it's primarily for IFR traffic and can cover busy areas.
But it's not like the U.S. system.
Not at all. In the U.S., Class B is that famous upside-down wedding cake structure that surrounds their busiest airports, extending down much closer to the ground. Canadian Class B is not that. It's high-level, IFR-focused airspace.
So can drones ever fly in Canadian Class B?
Theoretically, maybe with some incredibly rare, specific special authorization, but practically speaking, no. It's off limits. The reasons are straightforward. You simply can't reliably see and avoid high-speed jets flying on instruments at those altitudes. The operational complexity and risks are just far too high for current RPAS technology and regulations.
So the takeaway is, Class A and B are essentially reserved for traditional, high-flying, instrument-rated aircraft. Your drone just doesn't belong up there.
That's the bottom line.
Okay, that U.S. versus Canada Class B difference, it's a huge takeaway, definitely exam fodder. So A and B are out. Let's move down to where RPAS pilots with the right qualifications can potentially operate, but only with permission. Class C airspace first. Where do we find this, and what's required?
Right, Class C. You'll find this around Canada's major, busiest airports. Think Toronto Pearson, Vancouver International, Montreal Trudeau. It's a very active environment, managing a mix of IFR traffic and VFR traffic visual flight rules.
And drones are generally treated as VFR in this context.
For the most part, yes. It's actively controlled by ATC, meaning they're providing continuous services. Now, for you to operate an RPAS in Class C, it is possible, but you need two key things, non-negotiable.
Okay, what are they?
First, you absolutely must hold an advanced RPS pilot certificate. Basic operations are prohibited here. Second, you need explicit ATC clearance for your specific flight, and you get that by submitting a request through NAV Drone.
So, advanced certificate plus NAV Drone approval. And what level of service does ATC provide in Class C? How does that impact a drone?
ATC provides a very high level of service in Class C. They actively separate IFR traffic from other IFR traffic, and crucially, they also separate IFR traffic from VFR traffic.
Okay, so they keep the big planes away from the smaller ones.
Generally, yes. However, and this is important, VFR pilots, which includes RPAS pilots, are still primarily responsible for ensuring their own separation from other VFR traffic. ATC might help if workload permits, but the onus is on the VFR pilot.
So even with clearance, you're still scanning vigilantly for other VFR aircraft?
Constantly. Let's take an example. Say you want to film a new skyscraper rooftop right in downtown Toronto.
Okay.
You check NAV Drone, and it clearly shows Class C airspace overhead, maybe even bumping up against the Class B airspace associated with Pearson.
Right.
You absolutely have to file that NAV Drone request. You need ATC clearance. Without it, you're grounded. And honestly, given the density of traffic near Pearson, if your location is too close, your request might even be denied for safety reasons. It really underscores the need for careful planning.
Absolutely. That paints a clear picture of Class C complexity. Now, what about Class D? Is it the same or slightly different?
Class D is similar in that it's also controlled airspace, but you typically find it around smaller controlled airports, maybe regional hubs, places like Medicine Hat or Peterborough Airport. It's still controlled, but the level of ATC service is different.
How so?
They primarily provide traffic advisories rather than the full active separation services you get in Class C. Think of it as ATC giving you a heads up about other known traffic, but not actively directing everyone to stay apart.
Okay, advisories, not necessarily separation, but still controlled.
Definitely still controlled. And the requirements for RPAS are the same as Class C. You need that advanced RPAS certificate, and you must obtain authorization via NAV Drone, which coordinates your request with the local ATC tower.
So permission is still required. What's the absolute key difference for an RPAS pilot operating in Class D compared to Class C?
The critical difference lies in that separation responsibility. In Class D, ATC provides traffic advisories. They tell you who else they know is out there. But, and this is vital to remember, ATC does not provide separation between VFR flights, and that includes your RPAS.
So it's entirely on the pilot?
It's entirely on you and other VFR pilots to see and avoid each other. Imagine you're hired to film that golf course right next to Medicine Hat Airport. Class D airspace. You get your advanced certificate, you submit your NAV drone request, you wait, you get approval, great. Right. But during your flight, you have to be hyper vigilant, constantly scanning, listening, looking for, say, Cessnas, doing circuits, practicing landings and takeoffs. You know they're likely there, ATC might have told you, but you are the one responsible for staying out of their way.
Wow. That really emphasizes the responsibility that comes with that advanced certificate.
It does. These classes, C and D, are where advanced professional RPAS operations happen, but it's all built on following procedures meticulously and getting that explicit green light.
And you mentioned NAV Drone revolutionizing this.
Oh, hugely. If you connect this to the bigger picture, before 2019, getting approvals for controlled airspace was often a nightmare. Manual processes, phone calls, faxes. Yeah.
access.
Seriously, it could take days, even weeks sometimes. NAV Drone provides a streamlined digital interface. Your request goes directly into the NIV Canada systems, often getting reviewed much faster. It doesn't lessen your responsibility as a pilot, but it provides a structured, auditable, and far more efficient pathway to request access.
That digital pathway sounds like a massive improvement over faxes, for sure. Less red tape, hopefully. Okay, now let's tackle Class E airspace. This is where things get a bit subtle, right? I hear it's a favorite exam trap.
It absolutely is. The nuance is key here.
So Class E is defined as controlled airspace. No question there.
Correct. By definition, Class E is controlled airspace. But, and here's the crucial part, ATC only provides active separation services for IFR flights within it.
Ah, okay. So the airliners and instrument-rated planes are being separated, but what about VFR traffic, including drones?
For VFR flights and for most standard RPAS operations, you can actually fly in Class E without needing specific ATC clearance.
Really? Even though it's controlled?
Yes, provided, and these are important provisos, you're operating below 400 feet AGL and you're maintaining continuous visual line of sight, VLOS.
Okay, so below 400 feet AGL, VLOS maintained. No specific ATC call needed, usually. It's a huge distinction.
It is, and this leads directly to the absolute must-do rule for you when operating in Class E and also in Class G, uncontrolled airspace. You must always yield right-of-way to all crewed aircraft.
Because ATC isn't separating your drone from them.
Exactly. ATC won't be providing separation services for your drone from any other VFR traffic or even from IFR traffic that might be transitioning through lower altitudes. You are entirely responsible for seeing and avoiding.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you're doing an environmental survey in a remote part of northern Ontario. You check your charts, and maybe Class G airspace goes from the ground up to 2,200 feet AGL, and then Class E starts right above that. You plan your flight nice and low, say 300 feet AGL, well within the rules. You don't need ATC clearance for that. But you must be aware that IFR aircraft could be operating legally in the Class E airspace just above you, or even descending through it. Your vigilance is key.
So it's technically controlled, but for a drone below 400 feet, it operates more like uncontrolled in terms of clearance, but with the added awareness needed for potential IFR traffic nearby.
That's a great way to put it. It's about heightened situational awareness. And this brings up another common exam point. The typical altitudes where Class G transitions to Class E are often 700 feet AGL or 1,200 feet AGL. Knowing those common transition altitudes is important.
That Class E nuance controlled, but maybe no clearance needed below 400 feet. That's definitely one to lock away. Now let's move into what feels like potentially the most complex category. Class F airspace, the special use zones. What exactly falls under Class F?
Class F is definitely a category you need to pay close attention to. It's designated for specific special uses that might conflict with regular air traffic. This can include a wide range of activities.
Like what?
Military training exercises, designated aerobatic flight boxes, active parachute jumping zones, maybe even areas with specific ground-based hazards like firing ranges.
Okay, a real mix. Are these always active?
That's the tricky part. Some Class F areas are permanently active, while others are only activated periodically. Their status is usually published via a Notice to Airmen or NOTAM.
So checking NOTAMs is critical for Class F.
Absolutely non-negotiable. For you as an RPS pilot, checking both NIV drone and all relevant NOTAMs before flying anywhere near a Class F zone isn't just recommended, it's mandatory.
Got it. Now within Class F, there are different types, right? Let's start with CYR restricted airspace. What does that R signify?
CYR stands for Canadian Restricted Airspace. You'll see it on charts like CYR, followed by a number, say CYR 204. For this one, think R means red line, restricted, really do not enter.
Okay, sounds serious. Where are these typically found?
Around highly sensitive locations. Parliament Hill in Ottawa is a classic example. Major prisons, like Joyceville Institution, critical military installations or testing areas like the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range.
In the rule for drones.
Simple and absolute. Entry into a Class F restricted zone is strictly prohibited unless you have explicit prior written authorization from the specific agency that controls that airspace, usually the military or a government security agency.
Written authorization, not just a phone call.
Written authorization. And here's the critical insight and a very common exam trap.
Right.
NAV drone approval, even if you were somehow able to get one for that area, does not override a Class F restricted designation.
Oh, okay. NAV drone approval isn't enough here.
Absolutely not. NAV drone approval does not grant you permission to enter a CYR zone. Only the controlling agency can do that. in writing. If a client asks you to survey land near a cold lake and your charts show CYR 204, you must tell them it's illegal unless you can secure that direct written permission from DND. No permission, no flight. It's that simple.
That's a hard stop. Crystal clear. What about CYA then? Advisory airspace. The A sounds less intense.
It is less restrictive, but it comes with a different kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
CYA stands for Canadian Advisory Airspace. You might see CYAH for hang gliding or CYA for aerobatics. Think A for advisory or awareness. It's like that public park analogy again, maybe no locked gate, but lots of activity you need to be aware of.
So can you fly a drone in a CYA?
Legally, yes, you can enter Class F advisory airspace without specific prior authorization. However, and this is a huge however, you do so entirely at your own risk, assuming full responsibility for identifying and avoiding any potential hazards or traffic within that zone.
So the onus is completely on the pilot.
100%. These areas are often used for things like flight training, soaring, skydiving, hang gliding. You are absolutely expected to check NOTAMs diligently to see what specific activities might be happening when you plan to fly.
And if there is activity, report it.
You need to exercise extreme caution. If a NOTAM indicates active hang gliding in a CYA you plan to fly through, the smart and responsible thing to do is delay your flight or alter your route significantly to avoid any potential conflict. If something were to happen and it was found you flew into a known hazardous activity area without taking precautions, the liability would fall squarely on you.
So CYR is about explicit permission. CYA is about assuming risk and responsibility. What about CYD danger areas?
CYD, Canadian danger areas, are also marked on charts, often for things like military exercises or specific hazards. While they might not be legally restricted like a CYR all the time, the expectation from Transport Canada is that you, as a responsible pilot, will avoid them, especially if they are active according to NOTAMs, or if the nature of the danger isn't fully clear or could affect your low-altitude flight. Why take the risk?
Right. Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. The key insight with all Class F airspace is understanding the crucial difference between that locked gate of a CYR requiring written permission and the caution sign of a CYA or CYD, where the responsibility and liability shift heavily onto you, the pilot in command. And remember, always verify with official sources like NAV Drone and NOTAMs, as not all third-party apps might show these areas accurately or with up-to-date status.
That Class F breakdown, especially CYR versus CYA, is incredibly important. Liability is a big factor. Okay, let's shift focus now to where aircraft meet the ground. Aerodromes. When we hear aerodrome or airport, most people probably picture a major hub like Pearson or Vancouver. But the official definition is much broader, isn't it?
It really is, and that's a critical point for RPAS pilots. The formal definition of an aerodrome is essentially any area of land or water used or designed, equipped, or set apart for the arrival, departure, movement, or servicing of aircraft.
Pretty much anywhere a plane or helicopter could land or take off.
Exactly. The true insight here is that your awareness needs to extend far beyond just the big, obvious airports listed on standard maps. It includes certified international airports, yes, but also small private grass strips, hospital heliports, designated water landing areas for seaplanes, often called water aerodromes, and even old, potentially unmaintained or abandoned airfields that might still see occasional use.
So potential manned aircraft activity could pop up in places you might not expect.
Precisely. You need a wider scope of awareness. Hashtag TAC 3.2 military aerodromes, DND, strict no-fly zones.
Good heads up. Okay, let's break down the different types of aerodromes, starting with the ones with the strictest rules. Military aerodromes. How do we identify those, and what are the drone restrictions?
Military aerodromes are operated by the Department of National Defense, or DND. You can easily identify them by looking in the Canada Flight Supplement, the CFS. In the operator section, OPR, for that aerodrome, it will clearly state DND.
Okay, look for DND in the CFS. How many are there?
There are 22 designated military aerodromes across Canada, and they have a very specific, very strict drone-restricted zone around them.
What is it?
It's a 3 nautical mile radius that's 5.6 kilometers extending out from the center of the airbase. And here's a key detail to remember. That 3 nautical mile radius applies whether it's a full military airport or just a military heliport. This is different from civilian heliport.
Right, 3 nautical miles for DND, airport, or heliport. What are the rules for RPAS within that 3NM zone?
For anyone flying under basic RPAS operations, it's simple. It's a complete no-fly zone. absolutely no entry.
And for advanced pilots?
For advanced RPAS pilots, it is potentially possible to fly within that 3NM restricted zone, but only if you have obtained a specific Special Flight Operations Certificate, an SFOC, for that particular mission from Transport Canada, likely in coordination with D&D.
An SFOC is required. Anything else?
Yes. Since most military aerodromes are also located within controlled airspace, like Class D or E, you also have to meet all the requirements for operating in that controlled airspace, which would typically involve getting NAV drone authorization in addition to the SFOC.
Wow, so SFOC plus potential NAV drone clearance. That's a high bar.
It is. Take Dwyer Hill in Ontario, home base for JTF2. It's listed as a heliport in the CFS, but the operator is DND. So despite being just a heliport, it has that full 3NM restricted zone and likely Class F restricted airspace inside that too. The core insight: military zones demand the highest level of authorization, often involving an SFOC, and you must consult the CFS and potentially the Water Aerodrome Supplement, WS, for the definitive details. #tag 3.3 certified aerodromes, airports, and heliports. Permission is key.
Okay, DND means SFOC needed for advanced ops within 3NM plus controlled airspace rules. Got it. What about the next category, certified aerodromes? How do these differ?
Certified aerodromes are what most people think of as official airports and heliports. These are facilities that meet specific Transport Canada standards for safety and operations. You can identify them in the CFS because they'll have the abbreviation CERT in the operator OPR section.
CERT for certified. How many of these are there?
There are around 500 certified aerodromes across Canada. Now, for these, the drone restricted zones are slightly different depending on the type of facility.
Ah, okay. What's the difference?
For a certified airport, the drone restricted zone is the same as military. 3 nautical miles, or 5.6 kilometers radius. But for a certified heliport, the zone is smaller, just 1 nautical mile, or 1.9 kilometers radius.
Okay, 3NM for certified airports, 1NM for certified heliports. That's a key distinction. What are the RPAS rules within these zones?
Again, for basic RPAS operations, these zones around certified aerodromes are strict no-fly zones, no entry permitted.
And for advanced pilots, is an SFOC needed here too?
Generally, no SFOC is required just for being near a certified aerodrome, unless other factors trigger an SFOC requirement. However, advanced pilots must follow a specific procedure. First, you must contact the aerodrome operator directly.
How do you find their contact info?
It's listed in the CFS and often readily available in helpful apps designed for Canadian drone pilots, like Drone Pilot Canada. You need to obtain the operator's explicit permission to fly within their restricted zone.
So direct permission from the airport or heliport operator. Then what?
Then you need to coordinate the specifics of your mission with them, exactly where you'll be flying, what altitudes, the timing, and you must follow any procedures they give you. And just like with military aerodromes, if the certified aerodrome is also located within controlled airspace, which many busy ones are, like Class C or D.
You also need NAV drone authorization from ATC.
Exactly. It's often a dual permission requirement. Let's use Windsor Airport again. CFS shows CERT. It has a 3NM drone restricted zone. It also sits within Class D controlled airspace. So an advanced pilot wanting to fly nearby would need both permission from the Windsor Airport Authority and a separate NAV drone authorization from AVI Canada ATC.
So 2 layers of approval potentially. The key insight is that direct contact and coordination with the ground operator is essential for certified sites on top of any ATC needs.
Precisely. And remembering that 3NM versus 1NM difference for airports versus heliports is crucial exam knowledge. #tag 3.4 registered aerodromes, caution areas, vigilance required.
That dual permission structure makes sense for certified sites. Okay, moving down the list. Registered aerodromes. How are these identified, and what does registered mean for a drone pilot?
Registered aerodromes are facilities listed in the CFS or the Water Aerodrome Supplement, and you identify them by the abbreviation RG in the Operator OPR section. There are quite a few of these, around 1,400 across Canada.
RG for registered. Now, do these have restricted zones like certified or military ones?
No, and this is the key difference. From a drone regulation perspective, registered aerodromes are considered caution areas only. They do not have specific, legally defined no-fly zones around them in the same way that military DND or certified CERT aerodromes do.
Okay, no hard restricted zone, but a clear caution flag. What does that mean in practice for drone pilots?
It means for all pilots, both basic and advanced, you must fly with significantly increased caution when operating near a registered aerodrome. There's no specific distance defined, but you are legally required to keep your drone well clear of any manned aircraft and their traffic patterns.
So actively avoiding the areas where planes might be taking off, landing, or circling.
Exactly. Especially around the ends of runways or the standard approach and departure paths for heliports or seaplane bases. And as always, the caveat applies. If that registered aerodrome happens to be located within controlled airspace, less common but possible, you still need to follow all the rules for that controlled airspace separately.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The Bob Cajun Aerodrome in the Kawarthas. Its CFS listing shows RG. Drone apps might show this with a yellow caution circle, or sometimes those visual runway sausages on mapping tools, clearly indicating caution is needed, but it's not a prohibited red zone.
So the insight is legally accessible, but requires heightened vigilance.
Precisely. While there's no formal permission needed because it's registered, the concentration of potential manned aircraft activity is much higher than in open countryside. Your fundamental see and avoid responsibility becomes even more critical near these RG sites. Always yield to crewed aircraft, hashtag 3.5. Other aerodromes, unlisted, be constantly vigilant.
That see and avoid mandate really is the bedrock, isn't it?
Okay,
finally, we arrive at the trickiest category. The other aerodromes, the unlisted ones. These aren't in the CFS, or was. What are these, and how do we deal with the invisible threat?
This is where true pilot situational awareness comes into play. There are literally thousands of landing sites across Canada that are neither certified nor registered and therefore don't appear in the official publications.
Thousands. What kind of places are we talking about?
It could be anything. Private grass strips used by recreational ultralight pilots, open fields routinely used by agricultural aircraft, crop dusters during certain seasons, remote lakes that float planes use regularly but aren't officially listed as water aerodromes, even old abandoned military or civilian airfields that might look unused but could still see occasional traffic.
Wow. So how on earth do you prepare for something that isn't marked on any official chart? What's the rule for drone pilots here?
This raises that important question. How do you even know?
Well, sometimes a thorough pre-flight check using satellite imagery like Google Maps might reveal a suspiciously straight strip of grass or a windsock in a field. Local knowledge can also be invaluable.
But what's the actual rule?
The rule for all drone pilots, basic or advanced, is simple and universal. You must be constantly vigilant for the possibility of encountering manned aircraft, especially near any potential unlisted landing site. It's not just about checking the maps, it's about developing that pilot mindset.
Meaning constantly scanning the sky, listening for engine sounds, anticipating where an aircraft might appear, particularly at lower altitudes. Your absolute obligation is to stay out of the way and yield right-of-way to all manned aircraft at all times, regardless of whether their landing site is officially documented or not. Proactive awareness is everything here.
That pilot mindset of constant vigilance seems absolutely essential, especially with those unlisted sites. Okay, let's pivot to the rules themselves. We know the Aeronautics Act is the big umbrella law for all aviation in Canada. But for drones specifically, what's the core regulation we need to live and breathe?
For RPAS, the absolute cornerstone is Part 9X of the Canadian Aviation Regulations, or CARS. Specifically, it was introduced by SRR 2019-11, which came into effect in 2019.
And that was a big change, right?
Huge. It was a dramatic overhaul. Before 2019, the rules for drones, especially smaller ones, were much less structured. Operations often relied on getting special flight operation certificates, SFOCs, and the processes weren't very standardized. Part 9X changed everything. It created those critical distinctions we've been talking about, basic versus advanced operations. It established clear operating limits, like the 400-foot ceiling. And crucially, it laid out the structured requirements for operating in different classes of airspace, including the need for ME Canada authorization in controlled airspace.
So CARS Part 9X isn't just some dry legal document. It's literally the rule book that determines if, where, and how you can fly your drone legally.
Exactly. It's the regulatory spine.
And these rules aren't set in stone, are they? They evolve.
That's a really important insight for anyone involved in aviation. Regulations are dynamic. They have to adapt to technology and changing operational needs. We see ongoing amendments. For example, the upcoming SOR 2025-70 aims to further refine things, like expanding the integration of digital NOTAMs, making temporary flight restrictions more seamlessly accessible.
So staying current is key.
Absolutely. The bigger picture here is that these regulations mark a significant shift from a somewhat ad hoc system pre-2019 to a much more standardized, predictable, and safety-focused approach. It provides greater clarity and accountability for you as an RPAS pilot.
Okay, so we have this evolving but structured rulebook in CARS Part 9. To actually navigate this system safely and legally day to day, pilots now rely heavily on a suite of digital tools, right? This isn't just about paper charts anymore. What's in this essential digital toolkit?
This digital toolkit is absolutely fundamental to compliant RPAS operations in Canada. Think of it as your mandatory pre-flight checklist. First up, and arguably the most interactive, is NAV Drone.
We've mentioned that a few times. What's its primary role?
NAV Drone is your primary portal for requesting authorization to fly in controlled airspace, specifically Class C, D, and potentially some scenarios in controlled Class E where specific authorization might be needed. It replaced the old cumbersome manual system of phone calls or faxes.
Right, no more faxes.
Hopefully not. It allows for direct online requests, and critically, it feeds your request information directly into the systems used by EVI Canada air traffic controllers. It streamlines the whole coordination process.
Okay, so NAV Drone is for getting permission for controlled airspace. What about temporary changes or hazards?
For that, you absolutely must check NOTAM's notices to airmen. I cannot stress this enough. Check NOTAMs before every single flight.
Every flight. Why?
Because NOTAMs contain a timely information about temporary conditions or hazards that might affect your flight. This could be anything from aerial spraying operations or parachute jumping in your area to unexpected glider activity or even the temporary activation of a Class F danger or restricted area. Ignoring NOTAMs is flying blind to potential immediate hazards. And as we mentioned, recent regulatory updates are making NOTAMs even more integrated, sometimes appearing directly within tools like NAV Drone.
Got it. NAV Drone for clearance, NOTAMs for temporary hazards. What about the permanent, legally defined airspace boundaries?
For the definitive, legally binding descriptions of airspace, you need the DAH, the Designated Airspace Handbook. Think of this as the official legal map or dictionary of Canadian airspace. It provides the precise lateral and vertical limits of all controlled and restricted airspace classes. While apps and charts provide visual representations, the DAH contains the legally enforceable definitions.
So the DAH is the ultimate source of truth for boundaries.
Correct. And finally, complementing these are your visual charting tools, VNCs, VFR navigation charts, and VTAs, VFR terminal area charts. VNCs give you the big picture, showing large regions, controlled versus uncontrolled areas, and Class F zones. VTAs are more detailed, zoomed-in charts specifically for the complex airspace around major airports like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary.
What should we look for on VTAs specifically?
On VTAs especially, look for areas where controlled airspace, like Class C or D, is marked as extending down to SFC, meaning the surface. That's a huge red flag for drone pilots, as it means there's zero buffer of uncontrolled airspace below it. Any operation there requires NAV drone approval right from ground level.
Okay, so that's the toolkit. NAV drone, NOTAMs, DAH, and VNCS VTAs. Ignoring these isn't just risky.
It's non-compliant and potentially very dangerous. Why does this matter so much? Because using these tools consistently creates a clear digital trail. It demonstrates that you, the pilot, performed due diligence and checked the airspace conditions before flying. This enhances safety immensely, and it provides critical accountability if an incident ever occurs. But remember the insight. NAV drone approval is just one piece. It doesn't absolve you from checking NOTAMs or understanding the airspace from the DAH and charts. You need the complete picture from all three sources: NAV drone status, current NOTAMs, and the defined airspace structure.
That concept of a digital trail for accountability is really powerful. Okay, let's zoom out again and look at the bigger arc. The way Canada manages drone airspace has changed dramatically already. Where is this all headed? We're clearly in a period of rapid evolution.
Absolutely. The pace of change in the last decade has been incredible. If you look back before 2019, under those legacy rules, drones under 35 kilograms faced far fewer structured airspace requirements. Pilots often relied on those SFOCs, and approvals were very much manual, sometimes inconsistent.
The fax machine era.
Pretty much. Then came the 2019 regulatory overhaul with CARS Part 9X, a massive step change, creating the basic advanced split, mandating NAV Canada authorization for controlled airspace. It laid a whole new foundation.
And then came the digital tools.
Exactly. The early 2020s saw the launch and refinement of NAV Drone, integrating directly with ATC systems. That was huge for streamlining access to controlled airspace. And the recent SOR 2025-70 amendments continue that trend, pulling more information like Class F activity advisories and NOTAMs directly into NA Bruin.
So it's moving towards more integration and automation. What does the near future, say the next 5 years, look like?
In the short term, say 2025 to 2030, I think we'll see much wider implementation of unmanned traffic management, or UTM, systems. These are designed specifically to help integrate drone traffic safely with traditional crewed aircraft, especially at lower altitudes.
What might that look like practically?
You could start seeing things like designated drone corridors appearing, perhaps in Class C or D airspace near major cities, or along key infrastructure routes for things like power line inspections or pipeline monitoring. NAV drone might evolve beyond just a request form into more of a real-time clearance delivery and potentially even a basic tracking system.
Interesting. And looking further out, maybe 2030 and beyond.
Medium term, things could get even more dynamic. Imagine airspace boundaries, maybe the floor of Class E that aren't fixed, but can actually shift based on real-time traffic demand or even weather conditions. RPAS might start receiving automated separation advisories or clearances, think digital deconfliction messages rather than voice commands from ATC. We might even see Class F designations used more dynamically, perhaps for temporary environmental hazards like active wildfire zones where only authorized emergency drones can operate.
Wow, dynamic airspace, that's a big concept. And the really long view, 2040 plus.
The long-term future gets fascinating. We could potentially see entirely new ICAO airspace classes designed for uncrewed systems, or maybe a complete rethink of the AG system as drones, and especially advanced air mobility AAM, those electric passenger-carrying eVTOL aircraft become more common.
Like flying taxis.
Potentially, yes. You might even have layered urban airspace grids below 500 feet in dense city cores managed by sophisticated AI traffic systems coordinating both crewed and uncrewed flights.
That really does sound like science fiction becoming reality.
It's heading that way. And the key insight for pilots listening now is that understanding this history and trajectory isn't just academic. It helps you understand the why behind current regulations and anticipate future requirements. It raises that important question. How will you need to adapt as a pilot when dealing with dynamic airspace and automated clearances? It likely means a shift from just following static rules to being actively integrated into a digital system. And knowing Transport Canada, they love to test awareness of recent changes and future trends, making this forward-looking perspective valuable for your career.
That future perspective is crucial, especially thinking about career paths. Okay, before we get into specific scenarios, let's tackle some common stumbling blocks, persistent myths and tricky exam traps that our sources highlight. These are things that can easily trip up even careful pilots. Let's start with myth number 1. Uncontrolled airspace means no rules. We touched on this, but let's hammer it home.
Right. This is fundamental and needs constant reinforcement. It's completely false. As we established, CARS Part 9X applies everywhere, including Class G. That means maintaining visual line of sight, staying below 400 feet AGL, keeping safe distances from people and obstacles. All those core safety rules are mandatory in uncontrolled airspace.
So uncontrolled refers only to the lack of active ATC separation.
Exactly. Not a lack of rules. Your responsibility is actually higher in some ways, as you're solely responsible for separation.
Okay, myth busted. Myth number 2. If NAV drone approves my flight, I'm good to go anywhere within that approval. Is NAV drone the ultimate permission slip?
Not quite. This is another critical misunderstanding. NAV drone is the tool for getting ATC clearance specifically for operations within controlled airspace, Class C, D, sometimes E. It is not a blanket permission that overrides other restrictions.
Like what?
Most importantly, like Class F restricted airspace, CYR. As we discussed, entering a CYR zone requires explicit written permission from the controlling agency, often DND. An NAV drone approval, even if it covered the same geographic area, absolutely does not grant you permission to enter that restricted military zone. You need separate, direct authorization.
So NAV drone deals with ATC control, not necessarily military or other special use restrictions.
Correct. It's one specific type of authorization.
Good clarification. And myth number 3, controlled airspace is always off limits to drones. Any truth to that?
Thankfully, no, that's definitely a myth. While Class A and B are effectively off limits, other classes of controlled airspace, C, D, and E, are accessible to RPS under specific conditions.
Which are?
For Class C and D, you need that advanced certificate and the NAV drone ATC clearance. For Class E, as we covered, you often don't need clearance if you're below 400 feet AGL and maintain VLOS, but you still need to be aware it's controlled airspace. So the insight isn't that controlled airspace is forbidden, it's that you need the right qualifications and permissions to operate there legally and safely.
Okay, those are some major myths cleared up. Knowing the why behind them really helps solidify the knowledge. Now let's talk about those infamous exam traps. Transport Canada seems to love subtle wording and nuances. Let's revisit that Class E distinction. How might they phrase a question to catch someone out?
Oh, they have a few ways, but a classic setup involves two parts. First, they might ask, is Class C airspace considered controlled airspace? The simple, correct answer is yes.
Okay, straight definition.
But then they'll follow up with something like, is ATC clearance required for an RPAS operating VFR at 300 feet AGL in Class C airspace? And the answer there is generally, no, not typically required under those conditions.
The nuance. It is controlled, but clearance might not be needed for that specific RPAS operation.
Exactly. They're testing if you understand the difference between the airspace classification and the specific operating rules for an RPAS within it.
Sneaky. Okay, next trap. That Canada versus U.S. Class B difference. You emphasized this earlier. How crucial is it for the exam?
Extremely crucial. It's a very common trap, especially because so much aviation information online is U.S.-centric. You absolutely must remember that Canadian Class B is that high altitude, 12,500 feet to 17,999 feet MSL, primarily IFR airspace. It is not the FAA's wedding cake structure around major airports that extends down low. If you describe U.S. Class B on a Canadian exam, you'll get it wrong.
Got it. Canadian rules only. What about traps related to ATC separation?
Yeah, this is subtle but vital. The trap is thinking that once you get ATC clearance in Class C or D, ATC is now responsible for keeping your drone separated from everything. That's incorrect.
So what is ATC separating?
In Class C, ATC separates IFR from IFR and IFR from VFR. But VFR traffic, including your RPAS, is largely responsible for self-separating from other VFR traffic. In Class D, ATC mainly provides advisories. Separation between VFR flights is almost entirely the pilot's responsibility.
So the ultimate responsibility for see and avoid always stays with the drone pilot.
Always. ATC clearance is permission to enter the airspace under certain conditions. It's not a delegation of your responsibility to avoid collisions.
Okay. What about Class F restricted traps? Beyond just needing permission.
A common confusion relates to NOTAMs. Some pilots might think if a Class F restricted area, CYR, exists, but there's no active NOTAM for it, then it must be okay to fly there. That's wrong.
Why?
Because the restriction exists permanently unless you have written permission from the controlling agency. The NOTAM only tells you when specific hazardous activities are scheduled within that already restricted zone. And absence of a NOTAM doesn't make the restriction disappear. Permission always comes from the controlling authority, not the NOTAM status.
That's a critical distinction. NOTAM does not equal open access for CYR. Any other common traps? Maybe combining rules?
Oh, yes. Combo questions are very popular. For instance, they might ask about flying at night in controlled airspace. Like, can you conduct an RPA survey at night within Class C airspace if you hold an advanced certificate?
And the answer involves multiple factors.
Exactly. The answer is yes, potentially, but only if you have the advanced certificate with the night rating and you obtain specific ATC clearance via NAV drone for that night flight, and your drone is equipped with appropriate anti-collision lighting visible for 3 nautical miles. They're testing if you can pull together the airspace rules, the certification rules, the night rules, and the equipment rules all at once.
Those are definitely the gotcha questions. If you can navigate those, you really understand the system.
That's the goal. Transport Canada wants to ensure pilots have a deep, practical understanding for real-world safety, not just rote memorization.
Absolutely. Theory is one thing, application is another. Okay, we've covered the classes, the aerodromes, the tools, the myth, the traps. Now let's put it all together with some practical real-world scenarios. Let's see how this knowledge applies on the ground, or rather in the air. Scenario 1, a prairie power line inspection. All right, here's the setup. You're hired to inspect power distribution poles crossing farmland south of Red Deer, Alberta. You've checked your VNC, and the airspace is Class G from the surface up to 1,200 feet AGL. Directly above that, starting at 1,200 feet AGL, is Class E airspace. Your flight plan is to operate the drone at 350 feet AGL. What are your key actions and considerations?
Okay, classic rural infrastructure inspection. First, flying at 350 feet AGL is well within the 400-foot AGL limit for standard RPAS operations, so that's good.
Check 1.
Second, you absolutely must maintain visual line of sight VLOS with the drone at all times. That's fundamental in Class G. Third, and critically important in agricultural areas, is checking NOTAM thoroughly for any signs of aerial application activity.
Crop dusters.
Exactly. Crop dusters often fly very low, can appear unexpectedly, and might not be talking to ATC if they're operating strictly in Class G. That's a major collision risk you need to mitigate by checking NOTAMs and staying extremely vigilant visually.
Good point. What about that Class E starting at 1,200 feet? Does that matter if you're only at 350 feet?
Well, you don't need clearance for Class E since you're well below its floor and operating VFR VLOS. However, the insight here is awareness. Knowing that controlled airspace, Class E, exists relatively close overhead means you should maintain awareness that faster, higher IFR traffic could be operating above you under ATC control. While they should be separated from the Class G boundary, maintaining that vigilance for all potential traffic is just good airmanship. You're primarily concerned with other Class G traffic, but aware of the whole picture.
Right, that constant vigilance. Okay, scenario 2, flying near a smaller airport. You've been hired to film a construction project located just outside the boundary of Medicine Hat Regional Airport. Your pre-flight check using NAV drone clearly shows the construction site falls within the airport's Class D airspace. What's your operational checklist now?
Okay, Class D operation. This immediately flags several requirements. First, the pilot must hold an advanced RPAS certificate. Basic certificate holders cannot operate in controlled airspace like Class D.
Non-negotiable first step. What's next?
Second, you must submit a formal airspace authorization request through the NAV Drone web portal. You need to provide details about your planned flight location, maximum altitude, time, duration, and wait for NAV candidacy to review and approve it. You cannot fly until you receive that explicit approval notification.
Wait for the green light from NAV Drone. Got it. What else?
Third, once you are authorized in conducting the flight, you need to maintain communication readiness. While ATC in Class D doesn't provide active separation for VFR RPS, they might issue traffic advisories or instructions via the NAV drone system or potentially a specified frequency if you're equipped and authorized. Be prepared to respond or adjust if needed.
And the most critical part in Class D.
Constant heightened visual scanning. Class D airports often have significant VFR training traffic, Cessnas, Pipers, etc., practicing landings and takeoffs in the circuit pattern. ATC will provide advisories about known traffic, but remember, you are responsible for seeing and avoiding these aircraft. They likely won't see your drone easily. The key insight. Getting NAV drone approval is just permission to enter. Operating safely, especially regarding see and avoid, is entirely on you.
That responsibility piece is huge in Class D. Okay, let's ramp up the complexity. Scenario 3, an urban real estate shoot. You're contracted to get those high-value aerial shots of a new condominium tower in downtown Calgary. Your checks confirm the building is located directly under Calgary International Airport's Class C airspace. What's the plan?
Right. Downtown Calgary puts you squarely in complex, busy airspace. This is definitely advanced territory. First requirement, again, the pilot absolutely must hold an advanced RPAS certificate.
Check.
Second, mandatory NAV drone authorization is required. Given its Class C around a major airport, you'll need to submit your request well in advance, be very specific about your operating area, likely a tight radius around the building, maximum altitude, staying below 400-foot AGL, and likely well below that to stay clear of building tops, and exact times. Approval is not guaranteed and might come with specific conditions.
Expect potential conditions or limitations from ATC.
Definitely. Third, communication readiness is even more critical here. In Class C, ATC is actively managing traffic. They might need you to hold, adjust position, or even terminate your flight immediately if required for manned aircraft operations. You need a reliable way to receive such instructions, likely via the NAV drone interface, or potentially a designated radio frequency if coordinated.
And beyond the airspace itself.
Meticulous site assessment is crucial. Downtown means tall buildings, antennas, cranes, potential radio frequency interference, and limited emergency landing options. You need a solid plan for managing those physical hazards in addition to the airspace requirements. You also need to comply with CAR's Part IX rules about flying near people. The insight. Urban Class C operations are among the most challenging, requiring rigorous planning, flawless execution, and constant communication readiness, all while navigating a dense physical environment.
Peak complexity and planning needed there. Okay, scenario 4, a critical one involving special use airspace. A local municipality asks you to capture drone footage for a planning project near the Cold Lake Air Weapons Range in Alberta. Your VNC chart clearly shows the proposed flight area overlaps with CYR 204, a Class F restricted zone. What is the absolute unbendable procedure here?
This scenario involves That big red line, Class F restricted. The procedure is rigid. First, check NOTAMs to understand if specific military activities are scheduled, but remember this doesn't change the fundamental restriction.
Right, NOTAM status doesn't grant access to CYR.
Exactly. The core requirement is step 2. You must obtain direct, explicit written authorization from the controlling agency, which for Cold Lake is the Department of National Defense, DND.
Written permission from D&D. How do you even go about getting that?
It typically involves a formal application process directly to the base or relevant D&D authority, outlining the exact purpose, location, timing, safety procedures, etc. It's not a quick or guaranteed process.
So what happens if you can't get that written permission?
Then you cannot fly in that CYR 204 airspace. Period. It is illegal. Even if NAV drones somehow showed the area as clear, which it shouldn't for an active CYR, but glitches happen, that NAV drone status is irrelevant here. The Class F restricted designation, legally defined in the DAH, can only be overridden by direct written permission from the controlling authority.
The insight is absolutely clear. CYR means you need specific written permission from the boss, no substitutes, no workarounds.
Precisely. National security and operational safety take precedence.
Non-negotiable. Okay, scenario 5 brings in another factor. Night operations. You're tasked with capturing thermal imagery of an industrial power station near Fort McMurray late at night, say 10:30 p.m. Your airspace check reveals the site is underneath Class E airspace, which starts at 700 feet AGL in that area. You plan to conduct the survey at 100 feet AGL. What's needed for this mission?
All right, night operations add specific requirements. First, the pilot must hold an advanced RPAS certificate, and that certificate must include the night flight rating. You need to have passed the separate night flight exam and have the endorsement.
Advanced cert with night rating. Check. What about the airspace? It's Class E above 700 feet.
Since your planned flight is at 100 feet AGL, you're well below the 700-foot floor of the Class E airspace, and also well below the standard 400-foot AGL limit for RPAS. Therefore, for airspace purposes, you're operating in Class G.
So no NAV drone clearance needed for ATC.
Correct. Because you're remaining in Class G vertically, no ATC clearance is required for the airspace itself in this specific scenario.
But it's night. What else is mandatory?
The drone itself must be equipped with appropriate anti-collision lighting. The regulation specifies lighting visible for at least 3 nautical miles, sufficient to help other aircraft see and avoid your drone in the darkness.
So the key elements are advanced certificate with night rating, staying in Class G, below the Class E floor in 400 AGL, and mandatory lighting.
Exactly. This scenario highlights how you need to layer the rules. Pilot certification, airspace classification and operating rules, time of day rules, and aircraft equipment requirements all come together.
Great example of layering rules. Okay, final scenario number 6, back to Class F, but the other type. You're flying a drone for a forestry company doing wildfire risk assessment in northern Alberta. Your airspace check shows your operating area overlaps with CYA, a designated hang gliding advisory area. What are your actions and responsibilities here?
Okay, Class F advisory. This is very different from the Class F restricted scenario. The key difference, you do not need explicit prior authorization to enter a CYA zone.
So legally, you can just fly in?
Legally, yes. However, your responsibilities are significant. Step 1, absolutely mandatory. Check NOTAMs thoroughly for any current or planned hang gliding activity in that specific CYA zone.
What if the NOTAMs show activity?
If NOTAMs report active gliding, or even if you visually spot gliders operating, you must exercise extreme caution and actively avoid interfering with their operations. The responsible action would likely be to significantly alter your flight path, fly at a different time, or coordinate with the local gliding club if possible. Remember, hang gliders are often silent and can be hard to see.
So the responsibility is entirely on the drone pilot to avoid conflict.
100%. When you choose to operate in a Class F advisory area, you are accepting full responsibility and liability for identifying and avoiding any associated hazards or activities, whether they're listed in a NOTAM or not. The inset here clearly distinguishes CYA from CYR. CYA permits entry but demands pilot vigilance and assumption of risk. CYR prohibits entry without explicit permission. Knowing that difference is crucial for both safety and legal protection. #tag outro.
What an incredibly detailed exploration. We've really journeyed through the layers of Canada's invisible sky architecture today. We covered a massive amount, and I truly hope you listening feel much more confident, more equipped to navigate this complex airspace.
It's a lot to absorb, but understanding it is key.
Absolutely. So just to quickly recap, let's nail down those 5 absolute non-negotiables for RPAS and Canadian airspace, the things you absolutely have to remember. First, your standard RPAS flights are generally capped at 400 feet above ground level unless you have a specific SFOC saying otherwise.
Stick below 400 feet AGL. Got it.
Second, Class A and Class B airspace. Those are absolute no-go zones for your drone. Just stay out.
A and B are off limits. Simple.
Third, for Class C and Class D controlled airspace, you absolutely need that advanced RPAS certificate, and you need mandatory ATC clearance obtained through NAV drone. No exceptions.
Advanced cert plus NAV drone for C&D check.
Fourth, in Class C airspace, you can often operate below 400 feet AGL without specific ATC clearance, maintaining VLOS, but you must always yield to any crewed IFR aircraft that might be operating there.
Class E below 400, usually no clearance needed, but always yield.
And fifth, Class F restricted airspace CYR is strictly prohibited unless you have explicit written authorization from the controlling agency. NAV drone approval is not sufficient for CYR.
CYR needs direct written permission. Got it. And overarching all of that, the universal rule we keep coming back to. You absolutely must always check NAV drone, check all relevant NOTAMs, and consult the designated airspace handbook or reliable charts derived from it before every single flight. That trifecta NAV drone NOTAM NEDH charts is your absolute minimum pre-flight ritual.
That's the essential takeaway. Do that every time. So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you to ponder on your next flight. We talked about the future, about UTM and dynamic airspace. How might these incredible technologies change your responsibilities as a pilot? Automated clearances and drone corridors sound convenient, but what new forms of digital vigilance or reliance on AI-assisted decision-making might be required from you?
The role of the pilot continues to evolve.
It certainly does. We've explored a vast landscape today, and we genuinely hope you feel empowered and ready to operate safely and professionally in Canadian skies. Remember, staying informed, staying current isn't just a good idea.
It's the foundation of everything we do in aviation.
Exactly. It's the cornerstone of safe, legal, and successful RPAS operations. Keep learning, keep exploring those charts and tools, and above all, stay safe up there.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.